watching Businessworld Live. I'm Dani Laurel.
And I'm Jess De Los Santos. Here are the biggest stories to kickstart this trading day, Wednesday. A strong demand for OFWs abroad pushed remittances to an all-time high in 2021.
And it's not just remittances that posted strong growth in 2021. Foreign investment pledges surged last year. That's on the back of further economic reopening.
Transport operators are demanding for a fare increase as pump prices continue to spike.
And more than 9,000 foreign travelers have arrived in the Philippines since its international borders reopened last week. We begin our broadcast with remittances hitting an all-time high in 2021.
The Bangko Sentral says this reflects the global economy's rebound from the COVID-19 pandemic. Fresh data from the BSP showed that remittances sent home by OFWs rose by 5.1% to more than $31.4 billion last year. This was a turnaround from a contraction recorded in 2020. Remittance inflows for 2021 exceeded the previous pre-pandemic record of 30.1 billion pesos in 2019. BSP Governor Ben Jocno said the growth in remittances was brought mainly by a pickup in deployment and strong demand for OFWs amid the reopening of countries abroad to foreign workers. And 2021 was also a good year for foreign investment pledges as approved commitments surged by 71%. Data from the PSA showed that total approved foreign investments stood at more than 192 billion pesos. Economists attribute this to looser mobility curbs and increased economic activity in the Philippines in the last quarter of 2021.
Meanwhile, the Tourism Department reports that tourist arrivals in the country has reached over 9,000 since February 10th, when the country reopened its borders for fully vaccinated foreign nationals.
Now, more than half of these arrivals are foreigners, while around 4,000 are balikbayans or returning Filipinos holding foreign nationalities. Now, most of these travelers came from countries like the US, Canada, Australia, South Korea, and Japan. Tourism Secretary Berna Romulo Puyat says they are expecting tourist numbers to recover gradually. Now, is the tourism sector finally seeing an end to what has been a turbulent ride? To find out their game plan, we have Tourism Secretary Berna Romulo Puyat. Good morning, Secretary Puyat. Thank you for joining us today.
Yes, good morning, Jester, and good morning, Daniela. And good morning to everybody watching you right now.
Okay, just like what we reported, more than 9,000 international travelers so far. Does that meet your expectations as we reopened our borders? And what do these figures signify?
Jester, at least what it means is we're finally open to tourists. The whole world kind of locked down last March 2020. So it's close to 2 years. So it's important that we finally reopened last Feb 10 to 157 visa-free countries. And as you've said, as of Feb 15, we have about 10,676. And 45% are balikbayans. But I have to correct you because balikbayans are still considered as foreigners because they are not Philippine passport holders. But of course, I just like to know for myself who are really balikbayans are different from returning Filipinos. Returning Filipinos are really Filipinos who are coming back. But balikbayans are already foreigners. They're not dual citizens. But of course, we have about 4,879 are balikbayans and 5,797 are foreigners.
Okay.
But of course, they're all foreigners, not balikbayans.
All right, so at least a good start, at least here over a 5-day period, over 10,000 foreigners coming into the country.
Yes.
Question is, are they actually going to various tourist spots? If not, when do you at least see this happening?
When I was there in the airport Feb 10, and in the One Health Pass, there are reasons of why they are traveling, are all there. Most of them are traveling because they want to be reunited with their families. So that's also good because they're here for a vacation. Of course, they're going to spend here in the Philippines. Some have gone, like I've gotten reports in Boracay that they've been seeing foreigners from the UK. They just booked a flight to go straight to Boracay. So what's important is that foreigners are coming here. And in fact, this was a very pleasant surprise for us in the Department of Tourism because normally tourists come when it's, for example, it's their break, the break of their children or winter months. So knowing that they came here Feb 10 already means that they really wanted to come.
Now, which source markets are you most optimistic about? Earlier, we reported a majority of them coming from the US, Canada, Australia, Japan, and South Korea. Are these most likely going to be at least our major partners, at least for this year? And what strategies are you building?
For visa-free, number one, our tourist source is really South Korea. They're the number one. And then number three is the US. Number four is Japan. And then so at least most of our top markets are visa-free. So at least we will be continuing. We've never stopped promoting, even naman during the pandemic, because we should be top of mind. But at least now that we're open, at least these countries can come here without quarantine. But the reason why, maybe like for example, but the reason why the number one would be the US, because our market are really the balikbayan. So that's the number three market. With South Korea, when we have to look at the different source markets, it's not like before that we just have to promote, etc., and show the different sites. Each country in Asia, even though we're open to them, they have their own COVID concerns or they have their own quarantine restrictions. For example, in South Korea, when you go back, they want to come here. They've been booking, but the problem is when they come back, they have a 10-day quarantine. So so we have to. It's not like pre-pandemic that they could just travel and go back, but now they have a quarantine going back to their homes. But like for example, in the U.S., we expected that because when they go back, there's also no quarantine. But what is more important talaga, Jester, is that we are open. Our tourism stakeholders, I've been getting updates from them. They've been getting bookings, confirmed bookings, and there is an interest.
Okay. Ma'am, this is Danny jumping in po. On that note, how do we circumvent that other countries are not as open as we are, specifically, China, Hong Kong, a lot in Asia Pacific? Are we progressing in terms of, I don't know, vaccine travel lanes, vaccine bubbles, or other such travel, restriction-free, quarantine-free bilateral agreements?
We've been always working on with the DFA, mga travel bubbles. So at least there's no more problem coming here from visa-free countries. But of course, it really depends on the country itself. They have their own quarantine restrictions. They have their own cases. Like as we speak in other Asian countries, now palang nagkakaroon sila ng Omicron variant. So you're seeing high cases. So we hope that their cases finally become lower and so it's going to be mutual. Of course, they can come here, but pagbalik, they will become less strict or sana zero quarantine like the Philippines.
Okay, and domestically, is contact tracing and, I don't know, expensive testing, RT-PCR, antigen, is this still needed at this point as we're trying to become endemic? And how effective are the current vaccine cards, booster cards in travel when we want to reopen and we're still having quite some restrictions in being able to just travel freely?
With the IATF, since we have a good vaccination rate, especially our tourism stakeholders, they're already close to, 100%, like in Boracay, Baguio, Palawan, they're already 100% vaccinated. The travel restrictions are really up to the LGU. Some LGUs have become less strict. They no longer need negative RT-PCR. I think they only required RT-PCR when we were under alert level 3 because most of the tourists come from NCR. But when we went down to alert level 2 and as we speak, our cases are continually going down, all they're asking for is a negative RT-PCR if you are not vaccinated. But if you're vaccinated, no need. But and it's also good that we're already also vaccinating ages 5 to 11. So at least bawas ng gastos yon. But also the Department of Tourism through the TPB, we also offer free RT-PCR tests because this is to encourage domestic tourism. So when you look at the contribution of tourism to the country's GDP, last 2019, it was 12.8%, and 10.8% came from domestic tourism. So at least we're doing what we can. I'm seeing also that the LGUs, since we are now in alert level 2, they're less strict with contact tracing as early as 2020. For example, for accommodation establishments, we've been very strict with health and safety protocols. Most of these LGUs they give you a QR code once you pass their, for example, you are fully vaccinated, etc. And that's what's supposed to be used for contact tracing. With the hotel industry, with the tour operators, etc., we already know the drill. Unlike 2020, we had to start from scratch. There was no handbook for COVID, but now we know best. Like even when NCR, remember when we had an Omicron surge last January, you notice people were already mindful. They would already tell people, oh, I tested positive. And they already tell other people, diba, that they tested positive and then they were with that person. So I think we already know as Filipinos the minimum health and safety protocols, the do's and don'ts if we have symptoms. Or diba, when we feel something, we don't go out anymore because we're assuming that baka we're positive, etc. But you know what's good now with alert level 2 and cases are continually going down, we are vaccinated, and we continue to vaccinate, and we're already vaccinating even the 5 to 11-year-old.
Okay.
Vaccination is key.
Secretary Puyet, I want to pick up on one point you mentioned earlier, travel bubbles. This has been in discussion, at least if I'm not mistaken, as early as late 2020. How exactly did that progress, and what updates do we have on that? And is that still part of the drawing board now that it seems like we're coming up with an exit strategy already?
Well, it's more of, it kind of, because we already reopened to 157 countries. We wanted the travel bubble so that they can come here. But then the problem now is the other countries, because may quarantine sa kanila. But we're hoping that if it's still possible, at least inbound, there's no more problem for inbound because wala nang quarantine. When we were discussing the travel bubbles, it was sana if when they come here, they're in a bubble and they don't need to quarantine, because people will be really hesitant to travel if there's quarantine entering our country. But since there's no more quarantine, ang ano na lang is yung the mutual, because of course even for airlines, though they can come here, syempre they want yung both ways. So we're hoping that with more and more countries now are having less travel restrictions, so we're hoping that other countries will do the same. Although with some of our source markets like Korea, when I've been talking to some of the hotels and tour operators, they were saying that some of the people that they've talked to, they want to travel here kasi pagbalik, though there's a 10-day quarantine, it's a home quarantine, so they can still work from home. But of course, it's still the best gesture kung it's like normal pre-pandemic days. But of course, we'll see. We'll take it a day at a time. But what is more important is we are already open for tourism since Feb 10 from visa-free countries.
Now, talking about restrictions, especially quarantine, facility-based quarantine, that has been a major revenue source for our hotels. A few days back, we had the Philippine Hotel Owners Association. They are calling for government aid. Have they talked to you? What's the update on that?
That once during parang kapihan, and then we replied because first of all, the no quarantine was upon the advice of the doctors. So I explained to them that why will we quarantine pa rin if sinasabi na ng mga doktor no quarantine, di ba? Parang it's kind of off. Diba? Especially for our balikbayans, diba? So we've been talking to them, and their recent press release, they said that they are happy with the reopening and they're excited to go back to normal. In fact, a lot of the quarantine hotels have already been applied to shift to regular hotels. Of course, some of the hotel owners, I talked to all the hotel owners, and some of them told me that it will be a tough few months, but they are happy because diba, they were built naman as regular hotels, not quarantine hotels. And I've been talking to them, especially HSMA, the Hotel Sales and Market Association. They've been getting bookings already. It will be a tough few months, but nothing beats accepting tourists and going back to normal. And they are regular hotels, not quarantine hotels. So we're working on this together. The DOT will continually promote, and especially since we're already open, it's easier now to promote and to say that we are open, all health and safety protocols are in place. In fact, back September 2020, we already received the World Travel and Tourism Council Safe Travel Stamp. So that means we met world standards in terms of health and safety. So at least our new campaign nga now is It's More Fun With You. Of course, we were happy that domestic tourism was robust last year, but we are happy to be welcoming our foreign visitors.
All right, the hope, of course, is that tourist arrivals will pick up so that at least hotels can also transition with the rest of the world. Thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank
Again,
you,
Tourism
Jester.
Secretary Berna Romulo Puya. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Jester.
Now, we'll bring you more stories after this short break. Stay with us. You're still watching Business World Live here on One News. I'm Jess De Los Santos.
And I'm Danny Laurel.
Now, the Energy Department warns that oil price hikes may continue until June.
And due to the spike in pump prices, the transport sector is now calling for an increase in fare rates. Mon Gualvez with the story.
As a delivery rider, Rene used to allot 150 pesos for gasoline daily. But since the series of oil price hikes, he now has to double that amount.
Kasi yung kinikita namin halos napupunta na lang din sa pagkain, sa gasolina. Siyempre magtatapa pa kami.
Like Rene, jeepney drivers also now spend twice on gas. From 500 pesos daily, they now shell out 1,000. Times like this, they can only hope for a fare adjustment.
Taasan naman din ang pamasahe kahit konti para maging balance lang naman sa mga driver.
Taasan lang pamasahe. Sa krudo lang di kami namumuhunan eh.
This is the 7th consecutive time oil prices have been jacked up just for this year. A liter of diesel has gone up by 1 peso and 5 centavos. There's also an additional 1 peso and 20 centavos per liter of gasoline. In the metro, a liter of unleaded or premium gasoline can go as high as 75 pesos. Kerosene, meanwhile, now ranges from 58 to 65 pesos per liter. The hike, explains the Energy Department, is due to supply shortage in the world market.
Nung entrada po ng 2022, may mga issues po ang supply side. Unang-una, nagka-problema po tayo sa Libya at sa gulo ng Kazakhstan. Libya and Kazakhstan at yung Ecuador nagkaroon ng aksidente po sa pipeline nila.
What's worse, the DOE projects oil prices to stay elevated until mid-year.
Lahat po to, ang projection po ng plot is mag-i-ease out ito hanggang second quarter, end of second quarter, May to June.
Pasang Mazda could not wait that long. As early as January, they already filed a petition asking for a revert to the 10 peso minimum fare from the current 9 pesos.
Not enough ang subsidy ng 1 billion noong last year na pinagkaloob ng DOTR, ubos na yan. Ngayon maglalagay na naman ng subsidy na halos ganun din.
They also want capacity restrictions to be eased. Concerned transport groups are set to meet with the LTFRB on Wednesday to discuss this. For News 5, Mon Gualvez, we are One News.
The Energy Department says there may be other factors for the prevailing oil price hikes in the market. In an interview with The Big Story last night, Oil Industry Management Bureau Assistant Director Rodel Romero said geopolitical tensions are also causing the continuous spike in the prices of fuel products. For now, Romero said they are urging oil companies to give discounts to help support the transport sector.
The reason for the continued oil price increases, first is the increase in the oil demand. Tumaas ang world demand. Unfortunately, tama po kayo, there's a tightness in the oil supply, the world oil supply. Any supply disruption would definitely affect the price. Those other factors that would contribute to the supply tightness, the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. So it's a geopolitical conflict. There's also an oil spill in the pipeline of Ecuador, and then the Kazakhstan diversion of their imports to their consumption.
Dan, transport operators now feeling the pinch of those rising oil prices. What's the direction looking like today?
All right. Well, finally, Jess, after, you can see in my terminal here, just weeks or months even of an uptrend, we pared back those gains after oil surged over 2% on Monday. That was the highest in more than 7 years. Of course, amid that speculation that you just reported, a Russian invasion of Ukraine, highly likely daw. Russia now has more than 100,000 troops, which are massed near the border of Ukraine. However, they just announced a partial pullback of those troops. And of course, you've got them appearing to favor a more diplomatic resolution to all of these issues here. But you do have President Joe Biden saying the U.S. has yet to verify Moscow's claims. An invasion remains possible. But markets appear hopeful, at least today, that those tensions in Eastern Europe will ease, and oil is trading at $92 $2.87 per barrel. Another thing that's very oil sensitive is, of course, our peso. We are a net importer of oil that really affects our local currency, and it's balanced out, of course, today by that remittance report yesterday of 2021, and you can see us strengthening at 51.31 to the greenback. And how is our index doing amid all of these? And you can see that slide yesterday, and we are finally inching our ways back up. We are actually up back, closing in on 7,400 levels, up by 1% already in the almost 30 minutes of trade. Recall that those shares declined yesterday among those tensions in Eastern Europe. And I do want to take a quick peek at our biggest movers of the day. You've got Telco Converge up by more than 4%, followed by AC Energy, and only three sitting out this recovery, so to speak: ICTSI, Aboitiz, and SM Investments still in the red. And finally, just one stock to watch this morning. That is Double Dragon. Take a look at that, emerging from that slide in the past 3 days, at least, or at least yesterday. This, as they are still down by more than 9%. They did say that they expect to acquire their first property for hotel development outside of the Philippines. That will be in the second quarter, according to them. And they plan to launch that project in the second half. So again, Double Dragon looking to venture into hotels abroad. This, as their Hotel 101 here in Manila achieved an average occupancy rate of, get this, 96% in 2021. Double Dragon trading at 9 pesos and 34 centavos.
All right, finally, some recovery there for the index. Thank you, Dan. That's a first look into the business day this Wednesday, February 16, 2022. I'm Jess De Los Santos.
And I'm Danny Laurel. Mask on, wash hands, stay safe, Philippines. We are One News.